All right. Welcome to episode number 5. Really, really excited about this one. I'm starting it off a little bit differently than the others because I have an intro video that I'm going to play in a minute. But I first wanted to start by saying a sincere thank you to anybody who's watched any of the first 4 videos. And thank you to those people who've reached out to me and sent kind messages and supported me in any way. It's so appreciated. It's unexpected and overwhelming. So yeah, thank you if you're watching this. Yeah, this one is really special to me. It's a conversation with my good friend, digital artist Gary Tonge. I absolutely would not be doing this if it wasn't for Gary. Additionally, I want to say thank you to my friend Jeremy Daigle, who created the intro theme song for the podcast. He came up with an 11-minute theme song, which I'm going to release as a standalone episode on the channel at some point. I was actually listening to it while I was running on the treadmill a week or so ago, and I pictured this intro video that I'm going to show to you, which is a couple minutes of the song cut to Gary Tonge's artwork. And if you watch anything of this video, please watch that. I recommend watching it on the biggest screen you can find at the loudest volume that you can tolerate. So yeah, let's get to it. Thanks for watching.
Let's go. Here it is. The Gary Tonge episode.
You've got to introduce me to this guy at some point.
Yeah.
I keep hearing his name bandied around.
Like, how are you not constantly feeling like you're being pulled in 100 directions?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's funny you should ask that, because I was recently looking through my hard drive on my computer, and I was shocked before when I looked a couple of years ago. But like, there's so many projects I've helped with, and it doesn't seem conceivable that I've done it. When I look at the legacy of what's there, I'm thinking, have I done? It looks like maybe 200 different things in the last, I guess, it's probably 9 years since I really started working here in Canada on revelation work, and it was quite a shock to look at. I'm thinking, so if people will come and they'll ask me for something, and I'm like, sure, I'll do what I can, and then I'll do it, and then I guess that just keeps happening, and then I'll look back and think, okay, but that's a lot of stuff, and yeah, and I, because I try and do it for gratis, right? Anybody who needs work, and so many people that I know, or as well, Shane, who are doing this type of work, they don't have funding to do any of this. They just need something to help legitimize what they're making, and if I'm in a position where I can help do that for them, help bring legitimacy to their work, well, I'm certainly not going to deny that. And but yeah, it is kind of shocking. You say pulled everywhere. Yeah, I felt it a little bit this year. Things were getting close on our recent video, and I was getting a bunch of requests at the same time. And I remember my internal monologue was, "You can't do that. That's too much." And I thought, well, maybe. And then it's like, no, Gary, listen to your inner voice. You got to delay some of this stuff. So I did, actually, which is not something I sometimes don't do. I feel this like cross shape anxiety on my chest, and I've got used to recognizing that that's an indication that I'm about to drive my wagon off the road if I go too much further. So I've got better at deferring and not pushing too hard and thinking, oh, sure, I can juggle an extra tarantula. It's no big deal, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like every time you jump on a call now, you get a job, including this one. Now I've just given you a job for an intro.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, that's just keep things consistent, right? That's just get a job every time I open my damn mouth.
Well, you asked to be of service, and here you are.
I did. That's an interesting point too, because that is most certainly what I was borderline pleading for about 12 or 13 years ago. A number of pivotal things had happened to me, one of them being the graduation of my mum, which I've talked about in other interviews back in 2009. But something happened, it changed my attitude towards my study, and then I started to find myself more and more incompatible with the industry that I had worked in since I was 17 years old. And I guess it started kind of quietly, and I was saying, I wish I could do more. I want to do more. I really wanted just to help more people, because people would contact me about what they were trying to do. And most often I had no ability to do it, no bandwidth. And I started asking for more and more. And then by 2016, I was able to do it. But there was a segue of 2014 and 2015, which was really not the greatest set of experiences. But they got me into a place that I'd been asking for. So careful what you ask for, I think, is what I would say. I mean, I'm glad to be able to be in this position, but I guess what I thought was happening I was going to change lanes on the highway, because I was asking for that, and what I was actually doing was changing the highway completely, and I wasn't using an off ramp.
Right. Yeah.
Tumbled down like a bluff onto another road, and that's how it felt. There I was.
Yeah. Well, let's provide some context for anyone who doesn't know. I'm sure almost everyone who's watching this is aware of what you do, but you are an artist. That's what we're talking about here.
Yes, I am. Yeah. And the genesis of that would be when I was younger, much younger, like I guess probably 12 or 13 years old. I really liked making art. Art was the only subject I really embraced at school. And but at the same time, I was really interested in technology, computers, and computers at the time were really rudimentary. But I was obsessed with trying to make art on a computer, even though the restrictions were so significant. You could really not paint much on a computer. And to cut a long story short, Atari brought a 16-bit computer out called an Atari ST, when it allowed you to paint with more than 3 colors at once. You could choose 16 colors at once from a total palette of 512 colors. Well, to me, that was like being offered the rainbow. So I petitioned my mum and dad, who my dad was living in the USA and my mum was living, but I was living with my mum in the UK, and they put money together and I got me this computer. And I started painting illustrations, and I started sending out my little 3.5-inch discs to gaming companies because they were starting to look for artists. And somehow, through sheer luck, I managed to get a job. In fact, I failed the interview because I was so inept. I just didn't know what I was doing, didn't know how to speak. But the person who got the job turned it down, and I was second choice. And I managed to get a job, and I got into video games. And then through that process of being in video games, I then honed my skills as an artist, because I was going to go to art college, and getting a job stopped me from doing that. I was just about to go to art college. So I ended up honing my skills as the technology grew, and it became you could do more and more, and I just couldn't wait to do more and more at the time. I was always banging on the ceiling of what was possible for a long time. Now, of course, that the ceiling doesn't exist anymore now. If you put enough time into something, you can make it exactly how you need it. But at that time, it was actually really interesting to constantly be pushing those barriers. So part of what drove me was the desire to always be doing as much as technologically possible. And at the time, if you were to ask me, just to make this about me personally, I was completely agnostic. I was actually agnostic and kind of ignorant, because I would say I was an atheist, but the truth was I just didn't have anything that qualified for me a God or a universe that I could believe in. So I was leaning heavily into what I now consider to be secular cosmology, because they really had it going on. Right? It just seemed so spectacular to me that they were trying to unpack what was being observed and trying to calculate and make theories of it. And it was very exciting for my teenage mind. So I was super into computer art, and really interested in cosmology. And when I think about it now, it's a different Gary. It's just a completely different person to who I am now. But that was how I was. But then I also recognize that on this world, it's pretty normal to be agnostic and secular, because there's no really overt education that gives us something that allows us to believe in God and a functioning and living universe that doesn't also kind of impinge upon ecclesiastical authority and some type of control. And I remember me pushing away from the control of what I thought the Church of England is, what I was baptized as. I didn't like the atonement doctrine. Was the thing that got to me the most, and I couldn't understand why, if this being loves us all, why would that happen? And we don't need to get into the atonement doctrine, but I thought,
do you want to just set that up a little bit for anyone who's not completely familiar with that idea of the atonement doctrine and why that can be a problem for people?
Yeah, well, I guess the best way to put it would be, if you're to believe that God loves you and God is upholding the universe and wants to be you to know God and to be like God, and that these experiences that we have on this world are just the beginning of that process, which is, I guess, a fairly loose but stable form of faith. It seems kind of inverted to imagine that same being would send what the church would call his only son as a blood sacrifice to change him, this God, from being angry at us to being okay with us. And I remember at the time thinking, a lot of religionists would say, he saved us from our sins, or he sacrificed himself to remove our sins. And what I couldn't get over was, categorically, people were still not doing great stuff here. So what you're talking about logically to me was an unmitigated failure. So he came and did this thing, and now God's okay with us, but everyone still continues to behave the same way. How does that work? My logical computer interested brain couldn't process it, and I thought which is why I just like jumped straight off religion and just pushed straight into cosmology, and through some fortuitous events, which involved my grandparents getting me a subscription to the National Geographic, and it happened the second issue I got was all about the cosmos and had all those beautiful fold-out maps that of like the universe dimensions and stuff. And I just couldn't. To me, that was like that's what I wanted to lean onto. But to go that a bit further, as I was getting into my early 20s, I hadn't worked it out, but I was souring on cosmology too. That was starting to make me feel quite uncomfortable. I hadn't got to the point where I was thinking, actually intellectually thinking or philosophically processing that I don't like what they're saying and it doesn't make much sense. But I was certainly uncomfortable, and that I think that put me into a position for what came next, and what came next led me to acquiring the Urantia book, which to put simply there it is. Yeah, hey, there's mine. Look, and which marries genuine faith, real science with real philosophy, like a triangle, and all of them rely on each other, and there's that of course that's how reality should function, and I was tacitly looking for what's in this book, but I didn't realize it was out there. So my pushing away from one side, which would be the dogmatic version of religion, and then actually wanting to push away from what is essentially the dogmatic version of science, created a desire for some common sense rationalization and philosophical conceptualizations of reality, which is what this book provides. And it also helps me. I can look at the world around me. I don't just read the book. It helps you when you're working through your daily life. I'm always looking for a balanced equation of stuff, and even in the midst of things bothering me, I try to work out why was I bothered then.
Yeah.
Why did I lose my shit?
The information's got to be practical, right? Like it
Right.
has to make sense both intellectually and intuitively on the heart level. And so what was it about cosmology that you were finding bothersome or wasn't offering up everything that you needed?
Yeah. Okay. So it was like a loop, a big segue. So the second issue, I think it was maybe February 1982, or maybe it was February 1983 of the National Geographic, had all this universe stuff in it, and at that time, cosmology was on this huge wave of like. If you look at it now pragmatically, a lot of people who are much more grounded in this sort of stuff, they're saying that they basically became rudderless. They stopped actually looking at empirical evidence and they started just theorizing everything. But the theories were very exciting. So it captured my 12-year-old mind. I thought it was amazing, and then it must have been 10 years later. So 1992 or 1993, they did this. They proposed the same thing. They did another explanation of the universe, and they were similar maps but more detailed. They did a much greater detail version of the Big Bang, and they were explaining, I know it sticks in my mind, they explained that they were using like crazy decimal points to explain, like I think they had a 0 seconds and 43 zeros and a 1. The universe was the size of an orange, and then you take 1 0 away, and then they said the universe was 95% the size it is now. And I remember reading that and thinking, I don't like that. And I admit I actually went back to the problem of of an uncaused cause, but at the time I didn't have any understanding. That's why I felt weird. I hadn't intellectualized it. So I remember reading that, poring over it. I read it a couple of times because I was still interested, and feeling significant discomfort. And I remember at the same time, a bunch of stuff was happening with UFO disclosure and George Knapp and Timothy Good's books and Bob Lazar. And I remember sitting in my car, arriving back, I think, from work, and I had the radio on, and somebody was interviewing, I think, Timothy Good about his book, and I think it was called Alien Liaison or something. And he was explaining some of the frameworks of what was being discussed on the down low in military circles and stuff. And I remember just being completely transfixed by what he was saying. And rather than getting out of the car and going upstairs to the apartment we used to live in Coventry, I just sat in the car until the interview ended. And some of the things he said really spooked me out. I was really kind of shocked by it because I wasn't expecting it. But it felt that a lot of the stuff that was being said really felt like it was something that gave more detail. And I remember pivoting from I'm interested in human cosmology to a kind of halfway house of I want the aliens to come and tell me what's going on. And I remember I used to say, if I die and I don't know, somebody's going to pay, right? Because I was still thinking, we had this temporary existence, and I was like, I need to find out before I die the secrets behind the veil. And I then started to lean in, which a lot of people do, into hoping an extraplanetary source is going to bring us the answers that we don't seem to be able to find here. That doesn't make any sense. And I existed in that space for a little while after buying his book and reading it. And a few things really shook me about his book. The one chapter was called, I can't remember a lot of the details, but the chapter name was called Soul Containers. And apparently it was a discussion between some extraplanetary race and the military, some part of the United States Air Force. And there was a conversation where they were referring to our physical forms as soul containers, and how little understanding and respect we had for that which contains our souls. And that really made me start wondering about what that means. Why would they say that? And I felt very strange after reading that. And I remember reading it twice, and it really kind of thrown me about. Mm-hmm. And I was still thinking I was atheist, but something was about to happen, and then it changed it completely. But if I look back at it now, I can see, and I know we've talked about this, Shane, and by all means you could do you could tell your own side of it too if you want. There was a lot going on at my early age that was conditioning me for about what was coming. Mm-hmm. I'm really conscious of that now. That if I look back at the segues into cosmology and the sort of rejection of the original version of faith as I was being presented it, they are all a preamble to wanting something that makes sense of both. At that point though, I did not know that was coming. I was still kind of like bouncing around, but I was finding some independent thought, and that independent thought was really, really mediocre. But it was definitely not agreeable to any of the things that were being presented. I just had my own opinion.
Right. Well, I happen to know what was coming.
Yeah.
I am familiar with this story. And suffice to say that you had a spectacular experience that redirectionalized you, changed the course of events, and something that you could say most people, especially in our secular materialist world, would give no credence to, would not be able to even believe it, yet you experienced it. And this is the thing with these types of events, and why I think it's so important to share stories, because so many people are having experiences that are out of the ordinary, but feel really alone, feel scared to talk about it. And so I don't know what exactly you're comfortable sharing from.
It's a good question, Shane. And there's I mean, we could pack an entire podcast with me explaining exactly what happened. And I know you know.
Mhm. Well, maybe
and
even if you could do it in a broad overview type of
sure.
sense.
I'm trying to get. I need to be able to give it a context that people can feel. I've already explained that I was in this kind of
Yeah. And first of all,
nebulous.
just to add some more context. So you grew up in Coventry.
Well,
And
actually, a bit more detail. I was born in Coventry. My mum and dad emigrated to the United States of America, Georgia specifically. Austell, Georgia is where we lived. My dad became an aircraft engineer at an aircraft at an airline called Southern Airlines. It ended up becoming Northwest. Long story. But my mum divorced my dad, came back to England in 1979 when I was 8. And then I continued to live in Coventry for the majority of my time when I was in England. And then for a period I was in London just before we moved to Canada. But most of the time in Coventry. But born there, left, came back. Yeah.
so you're back in England when this event or series of events happens. And how old were you at that time?
When it started, I can give a precise date. It was like September the 15th. I was just before I was 25, 1995. I talk about this. So, okay, I won't talk. There's much more to it, and I don't feel brave enough to talk about the whole thing because it involves other people, and not that I'm going to name them anyway. But from what happened to me, I had a shocking and kind of terrifying experience where a being. I was trying to sleep and a being came to me and I thought I was being abducted. Probably watched too much X-Files or some of the stuff I'd been hearing was frightening me. But after this event happened, and it was a female voice I could hear as I was lying down trying to sleep and I couldn't move. She was trying to calm me down. I was anything but calm. And I could hear this noise above me, this static noise. And I plugged my ears and I was panicking and flailing around in bed and trying to cover my ears. And it didn't matter how much I covered my ears, I could still hear it. And I could hear it was directly above me. So it was really strange to be able to hear where something's coming from when I know I wasn't hearing it with my ears. It wasn't oscillating air molecules, which is what you're used to hearing, right? I was pretty frightened for a while, and then I was reassured after a couple of days, and I felt a little bit. Well, I went from kind of fear to wow, what is that? And then this every single time I closed my eyes for a couple of days after that, I kept seeing this long room, and it had a beautiful arched window at the end of the room. And then it was like deep oak panels and like a dark floor. I don't know what the floor was made of exactly because it was covered in like drop files and Rolodex files or everywhere. It was like, I don't know, 30 or 40 centimeters deep in just files on the floor. And all these filing cabinets were all open and in disarray. Stuff was all everywhere. And I kept seeing this scene. And as every time I was either trying to fall asleep or if I was just closing my eyes to take a moment, I kept seeing this scene, and the scene kept evolving, and so the file started sort of moving around like there was wind in the room, and after a while the files started to kind of rotate and spin like it was like a tornado was in the room. And in the end, from what I could see, I could barely see the window anymore. All these files were spinning, and it just looked like complete chaos. And then they started going into the files, like ordering themselves, and it was making almost like a machine gun noise as they were like fire. I could see them going into the files, and then when they were filling the files, the file doors were shutting. So after, I guess, a couple of days, I was lying in bed, and the scene basically completed itself by every single file falling into every single filing cabinet in order, and all the doors just shutting. And then me standing in this very clean room with files either side of me that went right down to this window. And I had the only thing I could say was a complete recognition that there was something at the center of me that was completely connected to something that was very far away. And I went from being somebody who considered themselves to be agnostic or atheist or whatever I was saying to absolutely knowing that was a God. And I can't explain how that changed, that whatever was going on in the preamble got me into that place. And it just changed me completely. And because of this experience of this being, I felt like my head was blown open as well. It was a really strange feeling where I could feel like this being was kind of there all the time with me, and it felt like somebody had got my head and just blown it outwards. It's like I could feel like there was air in my head for like a month. It was the weirdest thing. I always felt like there was something there, and it felt like my head was like, I don't know, it went out like 20 feet in every direction. I'm going from metric to imperial here. 6 meters. So it was, and it's difficult to talk about all the details though, because the easiest way to put it would be, I've spoken about it before, and it has caused me significant difficulties in the past to open up to people about it. So I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah, I get that. And it's so unfortunate that is the case. And I think that's similar to many people, where people are having these very real experiences that are out of the ordinary and are not able to discuss it in a free way because of, a complexity of reasons, but it being used against you being made out to be like crazy. How long ago discussing these types of things, very real experiences, would have got you locked up?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern, right? And this is one of the reasons where, and we spoke about this before the interview. Like, one of the reasons I think, and I need to work out how I'm going to explain it properly. So I won't go into too many details. But like, what I'm conscious of is that there's no way that what happened to me, only happened to me. There's nothing special about me. Sure, I'm now in a position where I can do work that helps a lot of other works, and I think work is really important, but there's nothing special about me. And I want to, a lot of me wants to be able to talk about this, because you never know that people may be listening or watching podcasts like this, and they're carrying around with them similar inexplicable personal experiences that they're afraid to talk about, and being brave enough to talk openly about our own can often help them recognize that what they've experienced is a positive and life-changing experience that they shouldn't be afraid of. And I can talk about this analogously, because I'm an artist, and I'm like many artists, and I used to be in video games for a long time, and and I worked as an art director and a studio art director, so I was like managing a lot of artists, and part of that would be like counseling and discussing with artists. And I always found the easiest way to do that would be to speak about my own anxieties, or overthinking and having like irrational thoughts is actually pretty common with creatives. A lot of creatives suffer from that, particularly on this world. And there's reasons for that, and that I've extrapolated from the UB. But I found that when I opened up about me, they'd open up about themselves, and the conversation would really help them. So I'm really conscious that having conversations about the reality of what I understand, based on what was initially these experiences, is likely the renaissance this world needs. and that the way that people are pushed into a corner and made to toe the line of secular and materialistic conformity, I think is eroding anyway. But I think that I want to be able to help in a way that is, I don't want to be hyperbolic. I'm not interested in people being specifically interested in my experience. I want people to find validity in what they might be experiencing. So I'm still skirting around how to explain it. I mean, it's a really interesting story, and I'll touch on little bits of it as well if we can in the conversation. But I want people to know that if it feels real to you, it likely is. I mean, and I don't want people to slip off into feeling that because you've had an experience, and this is something I've recognized in other people's experiences, that don't feel that because you've had a special experience that it's coming from you. Recognize that when you have those experiences, that you are stepping into something that pervades around us, and you've been given the opportunity to be attuned to it. So remain grounded and humble in these experiences. Don't ever conflate you being the center of it. And that, because that's definitely something that happens here. And I totally understand why people fall into that on this world, because it's very, very hard to be an authentic you on a world that is currently governed by who you are, how you're perceived in the way this world functions. So a lot of people are struggling to be defined. Their identities are really garbled, and they're just striving for anything. So you can see why people choose to identify themselves as something. They want to stand out. They want to be seen. But the truth is they are seen. They're an individual that's not repeatable in all of eternity, and they're recognized by the universe and by God. The framework of this world may not recognize them, but that is something that I'm hoping we can overcome. You don't need to worry about how the world perceives you. If you're trying to do good and you're a kind person, you're not doing people harm, then and celebrate that, and the universe likes that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it just seems like there's this suppression of universe reality. There are aspects of our reality, that are real, that are completely suppressed, attacked, and there's very definite reasons for that. But it's so unfortunate, but it seems to me that things are reaching a breaking point. There's this building of pressure. And when these situations are manipulated for specific reasons, there is going to be a reaction to that. And I think we're seeing that with more people being able to talk about these things. At least that's been my personal experience. As I get to know over and over again, I'm talking to people and they've had these wild experiences.
And I agree. Just the episodes I've seen of yours so far, people that I know, but mostly, having these conversations with real people about their real experiences is really important. And something you introduced me to Christopher Bledsoe, who I sometimes message him now, and I know he's super busy, but he's a person who I consider to be on the same highway as us, just in a different car. And to me, what you're talking about, the kind of disclosure and revelation that is coming, that seems to be coinciding with an erosion and a collapse of the framework that has so far, for a significant, all of my life has been the status quo on this world. That erosion is being met with this renaissance, whether it be extraplanetary disclosure or revelatory celestial ministry, which Chris is a good representative, one of the agents of.
And let's be clear, this is a spiritual renaissance.
It is a spiritual renaissance, because there's no point just telling a secular world that other worlds are out there. They'll just apply secularism to that. There needs to be the missing component, which would be a a mind-made and personality-managed universe where you are loved, you are precious, you are unique, and there is a complete and total reason for you existing, and that your existence, or the type of being we are, which are mortals, we begin from zero, and through a very long track of education through the universe, we, through our own efforts and the ministry that helps us, we can actually become capital P perfect. And it takes an incredible period of time, but it is possible. The Urantia Book speaks about it. We don't understand. It's inscrutable to us here because we don't know the framework of what we're moving through. But part of that is recognizing that the universe is not a chaotic coincidence. It's intended. It might not look like we can make sense of it from where we are, but if we recognize where we are and where we're observing the universe from, we've basically got spacecraft that we send out. At the very furthest is like one light day away, and it's taken 50 years to get there, and it really can't give much information. Those Voyager vehicles can't. Or we're looking with telescopes and we're trying to make understanding of what we can observe. And we've made a pretty good fist of doing that, but we don't have any real understanding of the complex networking of worlds that we are a part of, or the reason for it. None of this is happening by accident. It's easy to believe it's an accident when there's no education otherwise. But if you really, this is the thing that I always find interesting, is you can look at the framework of God in the larger institutions, and it doesn't make much sense because they're inspired writings and beliefs that have come from a long time ago, and it's understandable that those factual retellings of the truth don't really hold up to the intellectual wave that we're living through. But if you look at the very complex intellectual framework of how they think reality is, and if you deeply look at that, you can see that doesn't work either. And it's important to recognize, just because one thing overwhelmed the other, it doesn't mean that thing is necessarily correct. It just happens to be a somewhat next step forward scaffolding for this world's evolution.
So let's take it back to the experience that began with the being, and sort of what transpired after that.
Okay. Yeah. So talking personally, just from my perspective, this wasn't a single event. This is a set of experiences that some of it, in retrospect, feel a little bit like Scooby-Doo, a little bit like segues to kind of help qualify what I was. The way I think about it now is maybe it was somewhat of a set of circumstances that helped me out of my own personal maze of confusion, and it nudged me left and right through one experience and another until I was in a position where I could start to assimilate this document, and I was like primed for it. So, and I want to requalify again, like what we were talking about before. The preamble to all these events is also important. There's a contiguity to things that happened to me that I've only touched on, that have led to when this experience began to happen. It helped reshape my reality recognition, so that when I acquired this book, I was ready for it in a way that I had no idea. So these experiences continued a lot. I know you, Shane, are somewhat of an experiencer, and look, I followed Chris's instructions, and I've seen orbs too outside of our house. Profound experience. I even modeled it, the orb I saw at 14 minutes in our latest video. You can see it. That's exactly what I saw. It isn't what I saw. I remade it in After Effects just to qualify. I didn't photograph it. I just stood in awe. I saw it 5 times in a row. Anyway, so I know you're an experiencer, and you are acquainted with many of the facets that are kind of unknown on this world to the majority of the population about what it really means to be a human being, a being of will dignity, that you are, the way I phrase it when I'm talking to my eldest daughter, River, about it, I say, you are not your body, you are inside your body. This is the body that you are going to be building your experience on this world in, and it's a temporary body, but you are effectively driving it. You're learning within it, and it has capabilities, and going back to you, it has capabilities that are often not understood.
Yeah.
So
we are more than our physical body. I've personally experienced that. And not only that, but there are things happening on this planet that are outside the range of mortal vision.
yes,
And
yes, that's
I
definitely
think
true too.
for the things you have experienced, that's the realm that this exists within. And that's probably why it's difficult to talk about.
Yeah, it is, because it's not. There's no qualification here, although there's likely qualification and verification to people who have had similar experiences, and I think, well, this is a worldwide problem, but I think is going to dissolve over time when more people are open about talking about it. But without going into any of the specific details, I would see stuff over and over and over at night. And recently, I was always frightened. So I'd see something. Maybe there'd be like a blue and green cloud in the room. And it's like, I get a look at it and think, I don't like the look of that. So I climb under the covers into a fetal position and I hope it went away. And then I'd wake up the next day and I would say, you should be braver, Gary. Just be braver. And then the next night there'd be a being at the end of the bed and I'd be like, no, I don't like that either. Right. I'm not sure I like that. So same thing, rinse and repeat. Fetal position under the quilt. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that 150 or 160 occasions where things had happened, and I was always trying to be brave. And I was also trying to meditate, and I was having some pretty amazing experiences when I was doing that. One of them I can mention would be I was trying to open the top of my head up, and it was something that I'd been somewhat taught to do by this being, and it involved feeling upwards, basically, and I got pretty good at it, and it had that same feeling that I was mentioning before about my head. Well, actually, it's not my head being bigger. Something is beyond the perimeter of my physical head, right? So on this one occasion, and it completely slayed me when it happened. I was lying there, and I didn't think it was working. And I find it it's hard to do because of my artistic mind. It's hard to quell the visuals that I see anyway. And I was lying there and I opened my eyes thinking, this isn't really working tonight. And then I saw what I considered at the time to be the face of Jesus, right? That's how I saw Jesus. I didn't see Jesus as he really is. I see whatever I thought. Anyway, as soon as I saw that and he was looking back at me, I start weeping because it's completely overwhelms your physical system. Right? What I was feeling was coming down from whatever mode I was in that allowed me to see this, and my physical system couldn't deal with it. And then I saw him, and from my understanding of Jesus here, he is a being. He's not the second part of deity. He's a being called an Order of Michael. He's the co-creator of our local universe, not to be too technical. He has a counterpart, which is a mother spirit being, and she's the co-creator of the same thing. He's place-like, and he can move around. And one of the things that this being Michael did was bestow himself as a human here. This is why we know him as Jesus. And she's ubiquitous. So I saw his face. I started crying. And then I felt like I saw what looked to me like a galaxy. And I felt like that galaxy was literally inside of me. So in my longer contemplations of that is, I felt like I met him in person and I felt her in person. Because she is this ubiquitous, like a womb that holds this small sector, it's a relatively small sector of space together, and all of our mind and spirit functions within her currently. And I remember just lying there, tears streaming down my face for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, while I basically felt like my mind went out for like 1,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 light years either way in a big hemisphere above me. And inside that hemisphere was what looked like a galaxy to me. And it's the craziest feeling. And I wasn't frightened that time. So congratulations, Gary. You didn't go under the covers. But these experiences continued, and there was some stuff that I'm not going to get into the details of, but it scared the hell out of me. But I will say that those experiences have made it possible for the work I do now to have a extraplanetary and cosmological grounding. But I don't want to go into the details about it because it's it's complicated.
These events were setting up the future work that you were going to do.
Yeah, and I didn't know that the Urantia book was going to be coming to me.
Yeah, and you were told to find the Earth book, right?
Well, somebody else was. Yeah.
Oh, yes, somebody. Right.
And I acquired it because they were looking for it. But when I held the Urantia book in my hands, I could feel it was real and feel it was true. It was very strange. And you remember a lot of strange stuff was happening to me on a daily basis. So, but I remember looking at the contents, and it was one of the foundation issue books from, which I guess was the mid-90s. It was like it's a really pretty, like ducky blue color. And it was like a plastic cover. And I remember holding it, and then it didn't have the parts on the cover. So when I flipped over to the contents, I saw that part 1, part 2, part 3, and then part 4 of the book was the life and teachings of Jesus. And I remember at the time of seeing that thinking, oh no, not that guy, because I had problems with Christian religion because of my own personal issues, right? And I was thinking to myself, okay, but that was the overwhelming feeling was I'm holding something that is really important, and all these events, I thought it was accumulating with acquiring the book, and that's not true at all. But at the time, it felt that way, and I really wasn't interested in reading part 4 of the book. When I finally did read part 4 of the book, I realized that the stories that are known on this world about Jesus are nothing compared to the majesty of his actual life, and it was just like the best novel about the most baller dude that ever stepped foot on the planet. I mean, it's crazy. It's a crazy story, and particularly when you recognize what he did 2,000 years ago, when saying the wrong thing gets you immediately crucified or stoned, and how he won the hearts of what is basically roughneck fishermen and brought them on board as ministers.
That story is so crucial because it involves us individually and collectively, right?
Yeah, it does. And there's a legacy of him leaving behind what is, a church calls the Spirit of Truth. The Urantia book says it's the same thing. It's kind of like a framework of his mind that's sitting on the Mother Spirit's mind network. That's how we're all connected. That's why we see things and why we can meet each other out of body and that sort of stuff is we're all connected in that way.
Interesting too, how like when people have these experiences with some psychedelics, say ayahuasca, there's this feeling of being really in tune or in touch with the universe, Mother Spirit.
Right. Yeah. And because it's like I think people on this world tend to recognize that if you can't stand on it and you can't grab it, it's not real. But they don't recognize that where we stand and how we grasp is limited to matter only. And if we really want to transcend that we have the facility to do it within us, but this physical form is not capable of doing that transcendence. And so you see, as you say, people who do ayahuasca, one of the things that stuck with me is when they have these experiences, they see, to put it simply, they're like, wow, this 3D version of reality is so much cooler than I realized. And then after the experience is finished, they come back down to what they previously considered 3D, and they're like, wow, this is like a 2D facsimile. and everything seems so bland and like flat in comparison because they've had this legitimate and far wider experience of reality, which I would imagine if we weren't on such an unstable world, this world has got lots of problems, but we don't need to get into that. But it would be educated that we have these facilities and we could engage in a safe and considered way with these abilities. It
Right.
just isn't really known
It's like when we experience this reality that we're in right now, we all have this framework. I've talked about this a number of times, the framework through which we see the world, and that represents our experience and everything we understand. And then there's outside this framework, which is, things we can imagine. We could maybe imagine that something exists, but it's not tangible. It's not part of our lived experience. But then maybe the person who has an ayahuasca journey or DMT or something like this, they go outside the framework. Now it becomes a part of their reality and they're put back into where they were before. And it's just like, what do you do with that now? You have to incorporate that somehow.
And that's important. That's right. It's recognizing that incorporation. You can flip it around. Let's flip it around and say, if you've got a tub of ice cream, your favorite flavor, right, and you look at it, right, first you don't have it, and then you go and buy it, right. So then you see it, but you don't know what it tastes like because you haven't opened it. So you break the seal of it, and you only open it, and then you eat it. Then you knowingly experience what the ice cream is, and then you put the tub back on. The lid back on, and you put it back in the freezer, and it's gone again. You're like, well, things were much better when I was eating that ice cream.
Or you try to explain to somebody what the ice cream was like.
That's right. You can't purvey it because you can't explain it because you have nothing in the universe can take the place of actual experience. And I don't think that this is not something that's going to be thrust upon us. I think people need to want to know more for these things to happen. I think what's happening is circumstantially the conditions are becoming more favorable for people to look for something bigger. They're looking for a larger context. My attitude towards the universe through the study of the UB, but also my personal experiences, whenever I'm trying to do or recognize any of these concepts, one of my feet is on this world and one of my feet is in the cosmos, and it's recognizing that I think cosmos in the original Latin is that it actually means a holistic understanding, and I think people are becoming more orientated that way. The things that are happening in different stems of society, you can see there's podcasters popping up all over the place having conversations about this. There's people who have all different walks of life, and they've had extraordinary experiences, and some of them are extraordinarily brave, and they're talking about these experiences while feeling they may be that suffer some serious consequences of being made a pariah, for instance, but the conversation getting wider, I think, helps people slowly be introduced to it. And my hope is that the world is making its way steadily towards those conditions to become more and more favorable. As new generations of people come, they're standing on the foundations of the generations that came before. So it's going to be easier as each generation grows up to have these conversations more openly. And I feel we're kind of at the cusp. We're on a brink, really, of that kind of happening. And I think that's pretty exciting. But if you think about my personal experience, and I think what happened to me and how I feel, and if I just look at it perspective, the world's like this and I'm like this, why is this gap? You can look at it and think, that's kind of frustrating because it's moving too slowly. But I think the onus is on people who have greater insights to take what they know is true in their heart and use the tension between where the world is and there to work favorably upon the world and help the world move forward, or your friend group or your family or whatever, and be patient about that. Don't expect the world to whiplash in the direction that you are. Because it won't. This is something. It's like cultivation. It takes a long time. I've come through quite a significant set of educational episodes for me to recognize that truth.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to that, because, at some point in your journey, it
Mhm.
ends up bringing you to Canada. So you basically have this life-changing experience. It
Yeah.
changes your trajectory and the work that you're doing, and that work is very important. So
Yeah.
do you want to get into that
Sure.
aspect of things?
One of the easiest ways to put it would be that, I've had a interesting and inconstant life, just like many of us, and I've stumbled through many experiences. Some of them thrust upon me, some of them from my own choice. And I think you already touched upon it a little, Shane. To have the type of experience that many of us had, but what I personally had, and particularly with my study of the Urantia book, it slowly sort of peeled me away, in a kind of splayed me from where I thought I was, and I started finding myself further and further away from where I was, and I as I was somewhat becoming incompatible with like working in video games, but I was also becoming more desirous of doing service work, and I was in a situation where I was in some difficult personal situations, and fortunately, my wife Lisa, who is incredibly supportive. I remember I went to well, we went on a holiday to the USA in 2014 in like September, and uh, we were about to fly back, and we were in Denver Airport, and she'd met a bunch of the Denverites and Boulderite UB students. She's not a UB reader. She's just an open-minded, pragmatic, awesome person. But she was sitting there, and I think we were having a beer in the airport, and she said that she wanted to support me. Now, we're both working full-time as well at the time. And I was so taken aback by somebody being so open to the idea of supporting me that it kind of overwhelmed me. And then there were a number of difficult experiences which made me feel like I couldn't remain in what I was doing, and I actually don't even know how these things accumulated. But at some point, I ended up here. I ended up here. I remember being in the local sushi restaurant to where we live,
Yeah.
and
And here
after
being
landing,
Canada.
here being Canada, British Columbia, and I remember sitting in the sushi restaurant and thinking, what's just happened? Like everything. Not that I own much. I'm not interested in owning a bunch of stuff, but everything that I did own, including my computer, was being shipped, and I'm sitting as a visitor at the time in Canada with a hope to become a permanent resident, and thinking, how did this even happen? And it almost felt like I'd been teleported in some respect. It felt like the wildest adventure. And I think because I'd lost a lot, and I'd lost my ability to work in video games. Really, it was something that I think had been coming for a much longer period than I recognized. I was finding it really hard to work for profit video games, particularly the way it was changing. And I think if I look at video games now, the problem that I was already perceiving a decade ago is significantly worse. The same. Don't need to go into the details, but I find it difficult to work for a lot of those big corporate video games companies now. But being here and making the financial sacrifice of just wanting to do this type of work, and it was my deep desire to do that, and finally being able to consecrate to not earning anything doing it, kind of emancipated me to be able to do that. So sitting in that restaurant, and then moving to a little apartment, and then starting making myself available was the kind of genesis of this. And it didn't take long before people realized that I was available, and then the asks start coming.
Mhm.
And that was 9.5 years ago now. And I don't I look back at it, and again, this is nothing about me at all, that I don't know how these other works would be helped. How I couldn't have done it. How would the work be done if I wasn't situated in this position where I was able to geographically, but mostly philosophically, spiritually, and intellectually, I wanted to be able to do this work to assist other people and other projects. And if I was like,
so essentially you've made a decision that you want to do something, you're feeling called to do work that spiritually uplifts humanity
Mhm.
in a world that doesn't support these things financially.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's a big deal to choose personally service motives over profit motives.
Yeah. I think it was kind of forced upon me. In some respects, it was a slow attrition of thinking that maybe I could do something that would give me a lesser and lesser subsistence and material subsistence on it. And the renaissance for me was having a meeting with someone, I won't name who it is, and them just poo-pooing the ability to ever do anything meaningful or earn anything meaningful doing this type of work. And I remember going up on a mountainside that was nearby and just looking at the landscape and saying to Lisa, okay, well, I'll just do it for nothing. And once I'd said that, it set into motion this kind of feeling like a teleport. And at the time, I didn't think I'd be moving. And then
sorry,
the next thing I was.
Was there any fear with that decision?
No, it's funny you should ask that. No, I don't think there was. And that's kind of, and I'm not somebody who doesn't function on a little bit of fear. I'm always worried. I carry anxiety, and I think anxiety is one of the levers, the celestial assistants I have, kind of to get my attention. If they want to slow me down, they just give me some anxiety. Gary, you're going too fast. And I'm like, no, it's going to be good. And they're like, no, you're not listening. And I'm like, no, it's fine. And they're like, okay, we're just going to give you something to worry about for a while, just so you stop. and that's happened on a bunch of occasions. And I can talk about some instances. I'm quite happy to talk about some of the instances that happened here that are somewhat about that. This year specifically, I've consecrated myself to stay behind my spirit leading. And I've been noticing more consciously what I think is guidance and maybe interference to stop me getting things wrong or going down the wrong road. And it's been quite an interesting process. But that's fascinating that you asked me about whether there was any fear in that decision, because when I think about it in hindsight, I don't think there was, and I've never even thought about that before. It started what I can best say. We flew from Denver to Cancun for a friend's wedding, and I remember standing on the beach, and it was dark. I see the stars above, and I was jumping up and down for joy as the waves were washing over my feet, because something had happened. It felt like, I don't know, I can't even explain it, but that decision just started moving us in a direction. Everything started to slot into place, and before I knew it, I'm in that sushi restaurant, and I don't even know how I got here.
Yeah.
And
well, I think it speaks to the fact that you were making a spiritually aligned decision.
Maybe, yeah. And there's so much has happened since then. I mean, we could make,
yeah,
you could talk for 3 hours about just
right.
the projects I've worked on, and just by listing them, and it would be very boring. And we don't need to do that. But
no, I do want to talk about some of those things, and maybe we could touch on how we met, because I have my own wild experiences, which I'm sure will come out more and more.
Are you talking about when you just started cold calling me?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I looked
nowhere
up this email because I was curious about when that was, and it was May of 2020. So
right, of course, in the maelstrom.
Right in the maelstrom.
The world being going all over the place. Everything was crazy.
Yeah. And that, that's the time where things were really changing for me. And it had started prior to that, but that was the big awakening point, or that decision moment where it's like, okay, it's time to get going. Let's figure out what my service is. And so it was very obvious that I needed to reach out to you. And it's so interesting how these synchronous events that happen in your life are set up like breadcrumbs, and all you have to do is follow them. And that's very much what it feels like for me. I was very much being encouraged to reach out to you. And it makes sense now why that would happen. But that was May of 2020. And I remember you were very gracious to give me some time. And yeah, now 5 years later, how far things have come, because it was years of me trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's funny because we're such firm friends now. And we've met personally. You know, you've been here. I mean, you come here occasionally because your wife's family live nearby. But yeah, we see each other all the time. And just for anybody who's listening or watching the podcast, I endearingly called Shane the catalyst, because everywhere he goes, he seems to be triggering people into action, and it's almost like he's doing it unwittingly, and he's leaving a bow wave of like things that he's energizing people to do, and I mean, one of those things would be making me feel more acquainted with speaking on camera. I'm not the sort of person that's interested. And if you notice, I haven't even voiceovered any of our videos. I'm actually much happier being behind the scenes and trying to do the study work and the graphical work to sort of purvey the message. But you've been part of the process of me being on camera. I think if it wasn't for your desire to do this podcast, which was, about 14 months ago when you started talking about this, I would have been more reluctant to help Derek Grimm with Urantia TLDR, which involved me on camera for the first time. And I think you're having an effect. And the thing that I think is so beautiful about it is that you're not paying attention to what effect it is. You're just kind of just being you. You're just operating, following those breadcrumbs, as you just stated, and the combination of following those breadcrumbs and being authentically you is creating these circumstances where you're catalytic to events. And one of the things, if you don't mind me rolling into it, one of the reasons that we made a video earlier this year called Aliens and Angels is your reasoning on it. And I remember you saying to me after I'd made it, "Oh, I hope you haven't messed up here. Did I get you to do something?" And I had to keep explaining.
I was worried
to you
about your reputation.
Yeah, but yeah, you're. I think you were unduly worried about how highly I think about myself, because I don't care. But you in your long-term work, for instance, you've known about Chris Bledsoe for quite a long time, and you only started talking about it maybe 12 months after you were first appraised of what was going on, and you've done a lot of research. And I started to study him a little bit and listening to you about it, and I recognized that Chris seems to be one of the main human conduits for this revelation of celestial assistance, which, that's, just be clear, from my understanding, we are completely surrounded by celestial assistance. If those beings could be made visible now, almost without qualification, they outnumber us on this planet. But we're not here alone. We're here acting with free will and under our own agency. But there are many, many circumstances where external scenarios are being are helping things move along for a larger plan, and we're the little players in the plan. And they're not here specifically to help you. It's like Providence is not about you. Providence is about the work that you could do. If there's utility in that work, then they'll work with you. They're not tinkering with everyone, right? But they are here, and they're ministering to us, and they're here for us. And Chris seems to be a good example of that. And your understanding of that and quietly knowing about it for months and months and months without saying anything, and then finally on one of our Wednesday night calls, because a bunch of us get together on a Wednesday, and you start talking about it, and I'm immediately drawn to looking at what he's doing, and I just this is the different car, same highway thing. I'm like, this is really interesting because this is definitely a very important part of where this world needs to go. I think the easiest way to put it would be, if things are not going great, which they're not, I mean, but in another way, you could say they are going great because people are tiring of what's going on. There needs to be a choice. And that choice, what I would say, is moving into universe normalcy. And universe normalcy would be acknowledging that there are unseen beings that are here. And on a normal world, there would be seen beings as well, but we don't have that benefit. And also acknowledging that the cosmos is inhabited by those unseen beings and also other mortal beings. Those are things that on a normal world, it would be known. And what needs to be happening is the re-steering of this world as a whole towards that realization. So I'm always looking for the symphony or the symmetry of those things happening and who might be part of that larger plan. And Chris is a good example. So my acquaintance with Chris through you, and then you plugging it together with your kind of balanced appraisal of both the extraplanetary and the celestial, brought about the concept of making something that is thoroughly talked about in the book, about the reality of people from other worlds and the reality of celestial ministry. It was a short video, but that short video also led into this longer video, which we've done. And if it wasn't for you, the catalyzer, I don't know whether it would have been made. In fact, I'm certain it wouldn't have been made. And I'm really glad we've made it. I like that video, but I like what we've done more recently even more, because it's built out on that. And I think it allowed me to go on a path of study to sort of pull together more of the details to explain our place in the heavens and the meaning of our place in the heavens and the other people in the heavens as well. And it gave me an angle of study that I don't think would have happened if we hadn't have gone and done that short video early this year.
Yeah, I think it's a really important video, and I'll post a link to it in the description. But yeah, I've said this privately to you for a long time as we've been along this, journey of years, and as I'm trying to find my path of service, and I'm always trying to get my ego out of the way and have a balanced approach to really consider both sides of any given situation. But then I've had these wild experiences, and whenever I really lean into my intuition, good things happen. And so the question I was asking myself is, why am I being so timid about it, about the things that I know to be true, those things that are spiritually aligned? And then it hit me about this idea of spiritual values and alignment with that being the path forward. And I'm just so sick of the elements of this world that are so disgusting, and the hatred and the vitriol and the amplification of animosity of one group to another. That is not the way. And we need to stand up in just being against that mentality and share what we know to be true. And this, I'm not doing this to bring attention to myself in any way, but something needs to be done about it. And we all have the ability to stand up. And we need living examples of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, taking away the, a lot of the, we don't need to get into the mix of it really, but it's obvious that, the cosmological derangement that this world suffers from is the acquirement of material wealth and influence and power or whatever, right? And those things are subjugating the people who get ensnared into it. So there's a lot of people who are celebrated on this world because they have a lot of something, when really it doesn't make them happier. you notice the people that have a lot of it just want more of it. And so is that, if you look at it and think, wow, it's like watching somebody go down a dead end, and the further they get down the dead end, everyone's like, wow, look how far they've gone down that dead end, and they're like, I want to go further, and you're like, oh, so it doesn't make any sense to do that. And so it's like I remember a deacon at a church once said to me, and it was really funny. It was a Christian church. And he said, if you want to know what God thinks about money, you should see who he gives it to. And I know that's not the correct way of looking at it, but it did make me smile. And it was a long time ago when he said it, and I thought it was pretty funny. But the truth is, it's really problematic to get ensnared in that which anchors us to the material part of our life. And that material part of our life is completely transient. That, you're not this body, you're in this body. What I talked to my daughter about, and you'll be lifted out of this body when it fails or whatever reason. And no, there's no ATMs for your big bucks where you're going, right? And everything is left behind here. It's the framework of what's going on here is just it's the outplay of this materialistic age, and I think people are starting to tire of it. And you also got this almost ludicrous imbalance in material wealth now, and I think that's also favorable for people to be looking for something new. And I agree. And people, with what you were saying, that people do awful things, and generally speaking, they're doing it for the root of it: profit, power, influence, and money. And
yeah.
And that it's sad that that's how things are. But I do think for people to be wanting a better way is to clearly see the negatives and that cycle. You can quite easily, once you start observing, you can quite easily see that people who have more of that, it does not improve their function. Well, I'm not saying everybody, because some people definitely do handle it and they do good with it, but it is I think it's not a lodestone I'd want. I don't want a lodestone of wealth. That'd be a distraction that would be complete. If you gave me that when I was 30, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I'd be doing something completely irrelevant. So I'm glad that I came through a process of recognizing that without having to be subjugated by it being imposed upon me. It is like being enfeebled by wealth in a lot of ways to me.
Yeah. I want to talk about the new video.
Okay.
Many Paths to Heaven.
Well, yeah. And after that, I'd like to talk about this because there's some stuff in here, and I'll touch on it, about how this video came about. So we made Aliens and Angels. I remember talking to you. You'd asked on a couple of occasions to see the script of this new video, and just for everybody, Shane is 3 hours ahead of us here in time and also in concept. Anyway, and I read through some of the early script with you, but Many Paths to Heaven takes its genesis from the videos that have come before it anyway, but Aliens and Angels definitely was part of that. And there was some spirited conversation among some UB readers about what I guess they thought we were highly speculating on in the video in Aliens and Angels. And because it was a short form video, it was designed to be short form. I think is it 3.5 minutes? I can't remember myself.
Something around like there, yeah.
So it was meant to be lickety spit, right, and go and just get at the subject, explain the definitions quite quickly, and I've not built it into any soundbite clips or anything, but it could be. And I think you mentioned we wanted to do that at some point. But it caused some people to have contentious feelings about the concepts that would pervade, and that led me to want to double down on my understanding of why I felt comfortable making it. So I would be lying in bed, which you know this, you know what happens when you're about to fall asleep or you're about to wake up, right? I'm lying in bed, and I keep seeing these passages appear in front of me, like floating in front of me. And it's not like I've never seen them, because I've read the UB, some parts of the UB I've read over and over, right? But I've, read it. I read it plenty of times as a whole thing. And anyway, they would just appear, and I was thinking, why am I seeing that? And for instance, one of the passages that kept appearing, and I won't say it verbatim here, was talking about on much more advanced worlds, people start not dying. They start being able to transcend their mortal form while they're still alive. All of us get a fragment of God, and that fragment of God is there to guide you. And it is not it's a pre-personal fragment of God. It gains personality in the act of fusing with you, but it is literally a fragment of the Father part of God. And on more advanced worlds, people start circumventing mortal dissolution, mortal death, and they can fuse with their adjuster and then immediately be taken to wherever their destination would be. And those destinations are all within our local universe, so it's a fairly small part of space, but our local universe currently has 3.5 million worlds, but we'll have 10 million mortal worlds in it. So it's very big compared to the concept we have on this world about inhabited universe, but it's still a pretty small part of space. And the highest destination is a group of people who are referred to as sun-seized mortals. And this passage kept appearing, or a couple of them kept appearing, and it mentioned that these sun-seized mortals get taken right to the capital of the local universe, and they get taken to the presence of Michael of Nebadon, who came here as Jesus. And then their first training is around these worlds that encircle this local universe capital. And what kept coming back to me, and it's something I already tacitly was thinking about when we made the previous video, but what came back to me was, if you can skip the previous set of worlds, which are referred to as Agondonter, it's a constellation capital, the training around those worlds is there's a type of being who mainly help conduct this training. They're called Urantia. And what they do is they put you into larger and larger groups of different ascending mortals from different worlds to test your ability to be able to get along with other people. And the basic parlance of what they say is, once you've got to the point of being able to leave Agondonter and go to the local universe capital area, you have got to the point where you can get along with anyone. You've been trained to be able to do that. And here's where these passages kept appearing, is there are people living in this local universe, we'll just deal with this local universe, who have grown in conceptual understanding and wisdom and love to such an extent, and also interacted with such a vivid array of other beings, and that would be celestial beings and beings from other worlds, that they don't need to go to Agondonter to train, and they get to go all the way to Salvington. And to me, that is like the most triumphant proclamation of the future of this world, that not only are we going to recognize that we're lovingly administered to, but the future people on this planet are going to be interacting willingly and in complex, loving detail with people from very different worlds, worlds that are not like us, and to other worlds that are similar to us, and there will be genuine communication. Because the only way you can go past that set of worlds, even jumping past the previous set of worlds, is to have had favorable interactions, so you've got some level of training. These worlds are gatewayed to allow us to train so we can move from one set to another. And it's in the video, and I'm sure we can put up some graphics to show the map of that, because I tried to simplify it. And it's so ecstatic to imagine that one of the goals that the Urantia Book speaks about is the world reaching a point of light and life, and there's 7 stages of light and life. And it also talks about that the evolutionary progress of a world can be finalized. It's only finite progress, and there are worlds out there that have got to a point where they no longer are evolving. They've got to the point where they've completed evolution, and that's also pretty ecstatic. But to be able to get to that level of completing that, just imagine how complex and abundant the lives of the people are who are on those worlds. And one of the things we wanted to put in there as one of the foundational concepts is the reality of worlds connecting with each other. Something that I believe, and we talk about, we talk about it a lot. We are starting to be shown the volume being turned up on. People who are seeing craft, above. The people are seeing inexplicable things. They're doing inexplicable maneuvers. It's all kind of crushed down. They're not allowed to talk about it, but so many people see it. And I would wager that out of the people that have said they've seen it, there are maybe 10 times more people that have seen stuff and they just don't say anything because they just don't want the hassle of admitting it. So that's part of, I think, what this video is trying to convey, is these possibilities that we have on this world. That this world, it's not the future that we're going to be enjoying on this world because we'll be long gone. But while we're here, we can put the careful steps forward to help the world in that general direction. That's the kind of the call to action that's on here in the video. Part of it, anyway.
Yeah. Call to action for sure. And it's an opportunity for a lot of people to take part, but it starts with getting interested in the subject and doing your own personal investigation, not being, not just going along with the social stigma and pressures that makes you not want to talk about it and acknowledge what is very clearly going on. And then for people like us who've actually experienced things, it behooves us to be willing to stand up and talk about it and make it more normal.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's like, if you want to genuinely know something, contemplate for a moment. How do you think you can achieve knowing it? Do you know it because you've read something in a book or a social media post, or a bunch of people believe it? Or the only way to know it is to actually put the effort in to honestly yourself progress to the point of knowing. And that would also mean embracing any of the experiences, whether they be ecstatic or difficult or tribulation or maybe a little frightening or whatever, the things that are outside your framework. If you start to embrace that, then if you're brave enough to go through those experiences and allow what we are kind of like somewhat underneath a cling film of here, if those opportunities will come. And if you do that, if you genuinely put the effort in yourself, you will get to the point of a knowing. And that's the only way you can know it. And I think you beautifully stated there, the only way that this progress will happen is one person at a time, and they have to make the choices. And from the perspective of the beings that administer to this world, we're not here for very long. This world has really poor longevity for many reasons. A lot of more progressive worlds have got way more longevity, so people have more time to get to the point of that fusion I was just talking about. But people have to be looking. They have to be given the opportunity to look first, which is one of the things I think is coming, and then they have to make the choice to look. And once you make those choices, then there's an abundant array of external and internal spiritual agencies that will help lead you into the right direction of that knowing, if you genuinely wish to know. And it might not be, it certainly isn't a straight line, and I've mentioned that already, and none of my progress has been a straight line. It's always been a mixture of tribulation and overcoming, and that's really important to remember too, that nothing worth doing is easy, and nor should it be. I mean, if it's easy, then surely it's not worth doing.
It's the thing I'm constantly wanting to say to people on this topic of like UAPs or whatever is be open, be curious, stop getting all your information secondhand, stop looking for some sort of authority to tell you what's real. And that authority is disintegrating by the day. We don't even know what's real anymore. when it comes to
It isn't.
information news. But, you know, reality isn't going away. We are here. We have things to figure out, and we're all a part of it. So why not get to work doing it? It's
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. It's, I mean, like, you know, I was saying about being teleported, like, and I feel like I've been teleported through this work as well. I mean, I don't, when I look back at how this work or anything that I'm doing, it feels like that I'm being assisted. Often when I'm making either scripting or making effects, when I'm really in the zone, as a lot of people like to say, I feel like I'm somewhat beside myself as the work is happening. It's like it's coming through me. I'm the most effective when I'm out of the way, so to speak. And I'll give an example, an anecdote about another video called "What Is Revelation," which was released in August of 2023, and I was having some difficulties working with someone. I want to loop this into something about the way that we collaborate. There's a collaboration between a group of us, and nobody takes charge. Everybody cares about making whatever we're writing the best they can. Nobody cares about whose fingerprint is on any particular concept. Everybody wants it to be the best it can be. So, you know, like the most recent video, I couldn't tell you who wrote any of the passages. I know that like the basic idea is mine, but through the process of like making it better, it's like it ends up being as good as it can be because nobody puts that their self position higher than anybody else. I was having a difficult process in 2022 with that sort of stuff, and I kind of had a reflex reaction to it, and I felt pretty good about making a statement about how I felt about the situation. But the next day, without going into details, they got me with anxiety, and it's one of the common things I worry about. It doesn't matter. It's something that's hyperbolic. It's something that makes no sense, but it's something as a child of the 80s just scares me. I'm always easy to scare into a bunch of different things. And I think what they were trying to do is my feeling on it now is that I'd got into a position where I'd stood my ground about something that I'd finally recognized was a big issue. And that issue related back to my feeling of lack of control when I used to work in video games as an art director. You're actually not in control of anything. And it's actually really hard to be in those situations. And I'd made this statement. I felt good about it. The next day I get thrown into anxiety. And our buddy, Josh Abernathy, who was also going through some stuff. That's all the people I know who do good work are constantly going through some stuff. This went through Christmas of 2022, and me and him were hanging out, and he's drinking his Keystone Lights, and I'm pretty sure I was
Josh?
just yeah. What up, Josh? You know, bit of Keystone Corner, and I was probably drinking gin or something. But whatever was happening was I was up late. I'm feeling anxious. I'm doing a lot of reflection because I'm just kind of it disables me. And I know I'm certain that if I go slower, that they won't need to do that to rest my attention. But they definitely rested my attention with this, and it's a number of days. It's got to be from close to like Christmas Eve all the way through to like 10th of January. And I'm in this contemplation thing, and I'm talking to Josh quite a lot. This one night I'm talking to Josh, we're up late, and expressing our feelings and sharing, what it might mean, trying to help each other. And I go over behind here. I can't show it now because we changed the configuration of the living space a little, but there was some toy chest stuff, and I'm putting the kids' toys away, and I'm kind of mumbling to myself about that I don't like this feeling. Why does this have to happen to me? Why are you doing this? Why can't this just not happen? Because it really doesn't help me. And then I hear a voice. It sounds like me, but this voice says, "Just be patient, Gary." And I'm like, it's late, and I'm a bit tipsy. Not super tipsy because I think I'd probably had one gin, over the whole night. Because I'm putting things away, and I'm like, okay. So I hear it, and so then I speak out when I say, well, I don't want to be patient. And I kind of feel like this warm feeling, this smile on my face, because it's kind of strange hearing a voice like that. And then the voice says, just be patient, Gary. And I'm like, I don't want to be patient. I'm slamming toys. And then I'm kind of like smiling and almost like laughing. And then the voice says again, just be patient. So I'm like, okay. So I carefully put the toys away and I go upstairs and I go to bed. And the next day I say to Josh, do you want to hang out again? I've got something to tell you. So we get on a call again, and me and Josh are, doing the same thing, talking about UB concepts and our problems. And I said to him what happened, and he's like, wow, that's crazy, bro. And I'm like, yeah, it's really strange. I mean, like, it really stopped me feeling that way for a little while. And I was still dealing with, the repercussions of this long-term anxiety. So anyway, we stayed up pretty late again, and I went to bed, and Lisa was already in bed, and I lie down. I think Lisa's asleep. Yeah, she's definitely asleep. But I lie down, and I'm sort of, I guess, somewhat fetal shaped, pointing in her general direction. And suddenly I can't move. I feel like I'm being pushed onto the bed. But at the same time as feeling like I'm being pushed onto the bed, I have this feeling of complete invulnerability. And it's a feeling I'd never experienced in my life. It felt like I could just punch the sun out of orbit. It was such a weird feeling. I don't know how to sci-fi it. It felt really strange, like a total invulnerability. Not a little bit, not bravery, not insouciance, like I am indestructible feeling. It was really weird. And at the same time, and it took me a while to assimilate this, and I'll just explain how I understand it now. I could see a diagram of the world like this in front of me, and I saw a arrow that was pointing upwards, and which to me I was reading as a measure how the world sees success. And then I saw a little arrow, and I could see that meant me, and I was like, oh, that's good. I'm not doing that. I'm away from that, and I'm not trying to find that success. That's because I'm not consecrated to try and find success here. And then the same voice that I'd heard the night before said, no, Gary, no. And I'm like, what do you mean no? And I still can't move. And this little arrow of me goes all the way down to the bottom. And I'm like, what is happening? And then the world goes like this. And then what I'm now understanding is the measure of success is the wrong way around. And then this voice says to me, the work that will be done that transforms this world will be conducted by those who are antithetical to those who are celebrated here today. And then it stopped, and then I could move. And I was so shocked. And this invulnerability feeling was kind of like feathering away. So I grabbed Lisa. It's late, and I'm like, oh, Lisa, wake up. And I've just had this crazy thing happen. Because, I was struggling with anxiety. And she's like, what? And I'm like trying to explain it. And I hadn't got it, what had happened, positioned in my head properly. So I was kind of like rambling. And she's saying, oh, you'll wake everyone up. You're speaking too loud. And we live in a townhouse, right? So I'm like, oh, okay. I'll talk to you in the morning. So I'm sort of elated that this feeling has happened. And I'm still trying to work out what I even saw at the time. So I lay back down feeling pretty good. And then it happens again. I get smashed into the bed again. I feel like gravity's doubled, and then I'm lying there and I can't move. And this time I'm floating through what appears to be nebulous space. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I start seeing graphics and menus flying all over the place. And it's like the easiest way to describe it is like a jumbotron, but like it was maybe like, I don't know, 3 kilometers wide in space. And I'm kind of like panning sort of past it slowly. So I'm like floating past it. And I'm watching what's on the video, and I can hear what I work out is Andre Rodatis' voice, but it's at like 5 times speed. And all the menus and the graphics are all moving super fast. And this is where it gets inexplicable, and this is where you have to be able to experience it to know. I recognize that what I'm seeing is a video that I haven't made yet. And I know what the video is because I've been trying to write a script for it for 5 years. And this continues. I think I'm probably watching this video for like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and then it stops again. So then I grab my phone, because I know I originally tried to write the script for this video in 2017, and I wrote somewhat of a diatribe, and I asked Andre to look at it and Merritt Horn to look at it, and it was, a lot of it was just kind of pejorative laced kind of frustrations with the world, you know what it's like. But it was more like a sort of a whiteboard of like thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd started with that, and then I went into the document. It was a live Google Drive document, and then when I scrolled into it, I noticed that 3 chapters had been written for this video, and I was completely freaked out at that point. And bearing in mind, it's like 1:45 a.m. I've had these 2 experiences. I'm now looking at the phone thinking, has somebody written this? Has somebody written this? What's going on? So I scroll down it and like flicking backwards and forwards. My eyes are all blurry. And then I read through it 3 times before I recognized that it was my writing that I'd done 18 months before, and I'd abandoned it. Right. So but I'd completely forgotten that I'd made an attempt at writing this script. So when I got myself together and I realized that like a midway being hadn't written it for me or something, I fell asleep. I got back up in the morning and I wrote the whole thing in an hour. Now, it wasn't good. It was a very Hemingway thing, which is Hemingway says that the first draft of anything is shit, and it was. But I immediately swung in, other people to help me reshape it. And it took a long time to reshape, and it ended up becoming what it is. And if you want to see what I saw when I was floating through space, just watch the video "What is Revelation," and it's more or less exactly what I saw. I don't remember all the details, but what I had been doing previous to having what I now consider to be an imprint of this future video was I was seeing a lot of there's a lot of diagrams and like pie charts, and there's all sorts of stuff moving around because there's a lot of data. I kept seeing little fragments of it when I was like grocery shopping or chopping carrots or whatever. I keep seeing little bits of it, but none of it, I could never bring it together into a narrative that worked. But after that evening, the whole thing was basically there. And once it's in that kind of like rough shape, that you've broken the back of the problem anyway. And I don't have any other way to explain it apart from
I'll post a link to that one as well. But it's amazing when these types of situations happen where, like you call it imprinting, some people call it a download, but it's like I've had this experience too with premonitions. My experience at the Monroe Institute and my journal from the Monroe is just it's bananas.
Some people started calling you a wizard.
Yeah. Well, I was at Hogwarts, so.
Well, yeah. I mean, you should talk about it if you haven't, because it's really fascinating. It's the same functions as what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah, and this is all, just to go back to what we were talking about before, this is part of universe reality. And, our current planetary philosophies, they're built on a foundation of partial understanding. And we're all just trying to figure this out right now. But again, it's a matter of being open to it and curious and lean into the idea that the universe is conspiring for the good and wants you to be a part of it. That's my encouragement to people, is to open up to that idea, because it's absolutely incredible what can happen. Look at, our friendship, our relationship. For me, it was all following these intuitions and these synchronicities. And that's led me into service, whatever that is going to be. It's rapidly unfolding. And, as much as it sucks that we are in this world that has such great suffering, we do have the power to turn it around, or be a part of the process of turning it around.
And I think
And
that's a really interesting point there, Shane, as well. And it touches on, well, part of the end of Many Paths to Heaven. And to get technical, and you just pointed it out perfectly, is this is a difficult world to be on. But in the future, when we're off this world, we're going to recognize that we've had robust and difficult experiences. And I'm not saying that that's fun, because it is not, right? I'm definitely not somebody who's had a bunch of fun here. Let's just be clear. I'm definitely more fortunate than some, right? But I've definitely had a tough time. And I know people having tough times left, right, and center. But it's a difficult world. But because it's difficult, there is more scope and latitude for positive action. It's easier to be a guiding light when everything is kind of confused. It's easier to show that. If you're on if we could be landed on a more progressed world, I often joke about it. We'd be rather remedial and average with these the concepts that we're carrying. But for the utility of this world right now, if you want to try and do good, it's actually not that hard to find a reorientation towards that positivity and do that work. And Many Paths to Heaven demonstrated that when Michael of Nebadon came here as Jesus, he chose this world because it was, I think it's a commonly known thing for readers of the UB, that out of the 3.4 million worlds, mortal worlds, we were the one dealing with the biggest problems. And to put it in a clearer term, it was the best place for him to demonstrate the most awesome mortal life. He wouldn't want to go to a really progressed world. There was nothing he could really do there. He came here, was born of a female on this planet, and like a normal child, and lived a life doing amazing work in difficult circumstances. And to add to that, he not only did that, but he got to the point of being able to fuse with his thought adjuster at the age of 31. And none of us are going to be doing that. People on other worlds aren't doing that either. They could be taking 100, 200, 300 years. I don't know how long it would be. There is some inference about how long it might take in the UB. But he got to that at the age of 31. But he demonstrated what we would consider a masterful human life. He demonstrated what we might analogize to being like a very advanced light and life world, and a sun sees mortals' behavior on this world. And he demonstrated that while we can't follow his steps exactly, we can take on some of that and be successful. We can be part of that, leading, working in a way that he worked. And it's possible to do that. And his story, if you don't read the rest of the UB, which is a lot of it's cosmological and some of it's incredibly difficult to understand, it takes a lot of years. Just reading the story of Jesus gives you a call to action of how much you can do in almost every situation on this planet. And it's the thing I love about it, and what you're also saying, is these are personal petitions to the individual. You can take better action. You can demonstrate a better way. Will you be effective in the moment? Who knows? Maybe not. Will your constant efforts to do the right thing, if other people start to see it and do the same thing, have a larger impact and a total impact on this world in the future? Absolutely yes. Jesus didn't come here to change the world in his life. He came here to be part of what will change this world and reorientate it back to universe normalcy.
Yeah.
He didn't expect it to happen in 36 years and was like, oh man, it didn't work out, right? He didn't think that. He's playing the long game, and that's the only way we can do it.
Right. He's truly the way shower.
Yeah, he's the way shower.
The way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah,
100%.
And when you read his actions, his individual actions are not undoable. You look at it and you don't think, I could do that. You're like, I could do that. Now, whether you could string them all together, that's a different thing. But you could, any single one of his actions, they're totally human. They're human actions, and that gives you a scaffolding. It gives you steps that you can move up through yourself, and we can learn that from others too.
100%. And I think that's talking about Jesus is a good place to leave it, a good place to end on. You got anything to add?
What I love about this conversation is we've barely scratched the surface here.
No.
and I hope that it's edifying and it helps people. But I am aware that like I'm holding back a lot. But I also
Understandably
want to point out,
so.
yeah, but I also want people to understand you don't have to have a bunch of crazy experiences to then to be motivated to do good. You can make a decision right now to do better. But I do think it's pretty funny that it feels like we've talked about like 5% of what we could.
Right.
But it also feels like we've talked about a lot. And I'm excited. And I believe that we're going to have a conversation with Josh too at some point in the future. And I'm excited about that too. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna focus on trying to find a way of expressing more in a way that works.
I think somebody can tease it out of you.
Well,
Corey,
maybe
I'm looking at you.
Oh, Corey might, yeah. I mean, she did an amazing job on her first interview with Jonathan. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Or maybe I'll get it out in a part 2. We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. Well, let's see how part 1 pans out. And I'm open to talking again. There's so much abundance to talk about with trying to do positive spiritual acts on this world. I'm like a walking, talking sponge for the UB now. You know and so are you. I could talk about it all day, and I tried very hard not to speak about it that much because that's not my identity. My identity is somebody who wants to act, be a person who acts of service for others. You know, I don't just do work for people who do UB work. I do work for anyone who's doing something that matters. So,
well, you definitely do a lot of service, and it's been a big motivator for me. So, yeah. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your friendship. And yeah, love you.
Love you too, buddy.